be among those joining the House Budget Chairman, Mr. Ryan, later on this morning in the rollout of the 2012 budget. Tell us what's in that budget and what's not in that budget.
Well, the budget is a long-term plan to bring the nation's finances back under control. I mean, to understand the situation we're in right now, just think of a family that's earning $50,000 a year, but it's not spending $50,000, it's spending $86,000 a year, and its credit card tab's been run up to $320,000. Proportionally, that's where the country is right now. Now, that would be a family in very serious financial trouble, and it's a family that's not going to get out of that trouble overnight. This is a long-term plan to get the spending back under control and ultimately to pay off the national debt.
In the Wall Street Journal this morning, Representative Ryan had this op-ed, The Republican Path to Prosperity. What is it that's in this budget that you and the chairman believe will lead the United States onto a path to prosperity?
Well, most importantly, it brings the spending back under control so that we're not constantly crowding out private capital that is desperately needed to provide business expansion for jobs, to provide credit to consumers to make consumer purchases, and to home buyers to re-enter the housing market. It rejects the $1.5 trillion of tax increases over the next 10 years that are built into President Obama's budget, and repeals the $800 million of taxes imposed by Obamacare. It restores competitiveness to the corporate tax rates so that American companies can then again compete with commerce around the world.
And in the headline in the New York Times this morning, Republican blueprint would remake health policy. Medicare and Medicaid costs could be split with consumers. Explain a little bit about how that would work.
Well, as you know, Medicare and Medicaid are spinning out of control very, very rapidly. They're the biggest cost drivers in the entire federal budget. What this proposal does on the Medicare side is to preserve Medicare for those who are 55 or older, so that if you're in retirement or near retirement, there'll be no changes in the plan. For those younger workers under age 55, it moves us toward the same kind of system that members of Congress have, where you have a list of approved plans. You choose among those lists. The Medicare system will provide a payment directly to the plan to underwrite the cost. If there are any additional costs above that, the individual patient pays them. And with Medicaid, it's simply what a lot of governors have been requesting for a long time, and that is to remove a lot of the federal restrictions, grant the states the money so that they can manage it more efficiently for their own populations.
We're talking with Representative Tom McClintock, a Republican of California, about the budget in two contexts. First, the budget that's going to be rolled out later on this morning by House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan, and also the clock ticking on the federal government and whether or not a deal will be struck that will keep the government working in operation past Friday. If you'd like to get involved in our discussion, give us a call. The number is 202-737-0001 for Republicans, 202-737-0002 for Democrats. All others, 202-628-0205. As always, you can send us messages via email and Twitter. Our first call comes from Middletown, New Jersey, on our line for Democrats. Bonnie, go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen. Congressman, in the last decade, the way the economists refer to the last 10 years, and it's been a lot more than that, the wealth of the nation didn't just disappear. It was reallocated. We have 400 families, 400 residents that have 50% of the wealth of this nation. And the problem is our insane tax structure and our insane trade policies. 150,000 jobs, I mean factories, more than that, but the factories, 150,000 factories disappeared in the last administration, in the last term of the last administration. And we were told they're not coming back. No. Well, they can come back. We had a tariff system. It worked quite well. Every other nation in the WOTC has tariffs. So if we put taxes on the manufacturers that are taking our jobs overseas and getting tax subsidies for doing it, we can bring the jobs back, and we would have the revenue from the working class. We have to stop thinking about our economy based on Wall Street. It's based on labor.
Bonnie, we'll leave it there. Representative McClintock?
I would warn very strongly against raising tariffs. We've got plenty of experience doing that. That was exactly how Herbert Hoover responded to the recession of 1929, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, a steep tax on about 20,000 imported products. Economists from left to right attribute the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act to turning the recession of 1929 into the depression of the 1930s. Hoover did a couple of other things that the prior administration and this administration do, and that is massive increases in spending. Herbert Hoover increased the federal budget 60% in just 4 years. He ended up by taking the federal income tax rate from 25% all the way up to 63%. And the result was the depression of the 1930s. All that Franklin Roosevelt did was to amplify and double down on those policies. The similarities between those terrible years and the administrations of George W. Bush and Barack Obama are pretty striking. It was George W. Bush who increased federal spending by a full 2% of GDP. Remember, Bill Clinton reduced it by 4%. It was Bush who drove that spending through the roof, produced massive budget deficits. All that Barack Obama has done is to take those mistakes, amplify and double down on them, and I think needlessly prolong and deepen the recession.
Next up is Greensburg, Kentucky, on our line for Republicans. Doris, you're on the Washington Journal.
Yes, Mr. McClintock, I had a question about since our government is in process maybe of shutting down, I don't understand why that, I don't know what the man's name is right offhand, I'm an older person, of why he has said this morning that we are going to have that trial for those terrorists in New York that's going to cost the taxpayers, there's no telling how much money, when it could be done in the military, which it's already paid for. And I don't understand why that no one is listening to the people. I'll hang up and listen to your answer.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, I mean, there are many of us who believe that those trials should always have been in the military courts. These are military combatants who've taken up arms against the United States. That's always been done in the military court system. Now, I haven't looked at all the newspapers today, but I understand there's a reversal of policy now on that subject within the administration itself.
Back to the phones, Great Falls, Virginia. Jack on our line for Independence. You're on the Washington Journal.
Hello?
Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just heard the first few words out of this gentleman's mouth, and that it amused me. Comparing the U.S. government and a country to a family. If it brings it down to the lowest level, then that's what they're trying to do. But they should understand that a country is not a family. If you want to go a family way, we can go that analogy and then continue on. For example, if one person in a family makes a mistake and costs the family a lot of money, who is responsible for that debt? Thank you.
Well, the family is responsible for that debt, just as the country is responsible for the debt that the federal government is currently racking up. You know, when you read that we are running a $1.5 trillion deficit this year, that comes to about $20,000 for an average family of four. Now, that's not a theoretical number. That is a debt that you are required to repay from your future taxes just as surely as if it appears on your credit card statement. In fact, you're required to pay it back before you pay back your credit card bill, and we've got lots of guys from the IRS who are very good at making sure that you did. So congratulations, as a result of this last year's deficit, you just bought a new car. The only problem is you didn't get the new car. All you got were the payments for the new car and a year of deficit spending at these levels. That's what's got to stop, and that's why the budget that the Budget Committee and Chairman Paul Ryan will be rolling out today is so critically important. for the future of the country and the future of every family who's responsible for paying off all of the debts that this government is running up. The Heritage Center for Data Analysis predicts that as a result of the budget that we'll be rolling out today, next year we'll see 1 million new jobs created in the United States. That's a big step forward.
Of more immediate concern to a lot of folks is the prospect that the federal government may shut down at midnight on Friday. The Speaker is going to the White House today to talk about some of this with the President. It's being reported on the Hill, in the Hill newspaper this morning. Republicans say that $33 billion rather, is not enough. Clash over cuts means shutdown looking more likely. Tell us about where the different sides are and how the different sides can come together in order to keep the government from shutting down.
Well, first of all, there's no excuse for the government shutting down. It's been 45 days now since the House passed H.R. 1, which would continue funding the federal government through the end of the fiscal year on September 30th. The reason we're in this mess to begin with is the fact that the last Congress refused to pass a budget, and so we've been operating on continuing resolutions since. Not only did the House provide a full, comprehensive plan to get us through the end of the fiscal year, it has also passed not one but two temporary extensions, waiting for the Senate to act on H.R. 1. So ultimately that ball is in the Senate's court. Now the Speaker today is introducing a third temporary stopgap to prevent a government shutdown while the Senate continues to try to get its act together.
Take us a little bit behind the scenes with regard to negotiations. How far apart are the two?
Well, one side is trying to bring spending back under control, and the other isn't. It comes down to that simple. And let's put the $61 billion of cuts proposed by the House in proper perspective. In the last 3 years, we've seen a 24% increase in spending. The $61 billion of cuts in H.R. 1 is less than 2%. So after a 24% increase in spending, we're finding a vigorous resistance in the Senate to making less than a 2% reduction. Now, if we can't do at least that in this first attempt to bring spending under control, we're not going to bring it under control. And we are being warned from economists from left to right that if we continue down the path we are on, we have at best, 5 years before this nation faces a sovereign debt crisis and quite possibly the financial collapse of the United States government. And if history is doing anything, it's screaming this warning at us, that bankrupt countries aren't around very long. Because before you can provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare, you've got to be able to finance it. And the ability of this government to do so is now coming into grave doubt.
Back to the phones in our discussion with Representative Tom McClintock, Republican of California and a member of the House Budget Committee. Our next call comes from Wilmington, North Carolina. John, on our line for Republicans, you're on the Washington Journal.
Thank you very much, and thank goodness for C-SPAN. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Okay. I wanted to ask the Congressman, with all the talk of the budget, and then he also mentioned the fact of getting the corporate taxes back in line, but last week we saw a report that said that General Electric made $15.5 billion last year and paid zero taxes. In addition to that, they got a tax credit from the federal government. Google, same thing, billions of dollars in profit, but no taxes. Isn't that a problem that should be looked at and focused at by people like the Congressman?
Oh, yes, it is a problem. I mean, we've got freeloading companies all across the country, and that's one of the things that the budget that we'll be rolling out today begins to address, all of the corporate welfare that's going to politically favored companies at the expense of everybody else. But the budget overall reduces the broad tax rate so that companies can compete on a more even field and can be competitive again with foreign companies.
Next up, Seattle, Washington, on our line for Democrats. Chris, you're on the Washington Journal.
Thank you for taking my call. Representative McClintock, along the lines of the question you just received from the other gentleman, how do you justify the subsidies going to massive agribusiness, not the common farmer, but these major corporations where you're actually giving subsidies to not grow crops, the major millions and hundreds of millions of dollars for subsidies to oil companies that are making record profits for almost 5 years on the backs of the basic poor and the working man. And then included in this budget that this president put in that was ignored by the Bush administration was the cost of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. So here's literally billions of dollars being spent by the federal government, never in the budget. Now it's in the budget, and Republicans are using the hue and cry that the government is overspending, when in fact the accounting probabilities were that it was never in the lines in the first place. Please answer that question. I'll take my answer offline.
Well, I agree with about 95% of what you said. The agricultural subsidies, the subsidies going to energy companies are completely out of line. They are indefensible, and they are addressed in this Republican budget that we rolled out today. The budget brings agricultural subsidies down. It brings the subsidies to energy companies down. It makes a huge step in that direction, and that's sorely needed. With respect to the wars, you forgot the new war in Libya that the President has plunged us into without congressional approval, in direct violation of the War Powers Act as well as the United States Constitution, which reserves the decision to go to war strictly to the U.S. Congress. I believe that the war in Iraq was a huge mistake. Iraq never attacked us, but it was at least a decision that was brought to the Congress, and it was Congress's mistake. It was pursued by the Bush administration, but at least Congress authorized it. Congress has not authorized a third war in Libya. So I agree with virtually everything that you've said. And with respect to the indefensible subsidies going to agribusiness, going to the energy industry, those subsidies are addressed pretty dramatically in the budget that will be released today.
We've got this Twitter message from IB Talking, who writes, Tom, you haven't mentioned jobs. To create jobs is why your party is the majority in the House. You overlook jobs so far. IB Talking asks why.
Well, IB Talking probably hasn't been listening since we began the broadcast. As I pointed out, the Heritage Data Center estimates that as a result of this budget, we'll see 1 million new jobs created next year, and they project 4% unemployment by the year 2015. Huge steps forward. We have to understand something. Government spending does not improve the job market. It retards the job market because it crowds out private capital. And you can see that very clearly in the Bush administration. As I said, the Bush administration increased spending by a full 2% of the gross domestic product of this country. If massive taxes and huge increases in spending were the road to prosperity, the Bush administration should have ended with the most prosperous age in our memories. Compare that to the Clinton administration. Bill Clinton reduced spending by a miraculous 4% of GDP. He attacked the entitlement problems on the welfare side. He signed what amounted to the biggest capital gains tax cut in American history. And the result was a period of dramatic prosperity and economic expansion, and the only 4 budget surpluses of the last 40 years. Ronald Reagan did the same thing in the early 1980s. John F. Kennedy did the same thing in the early 1960s. Harry Truman, in 1946, reduced the federal budget from $85 billion down to $30 billion in a single year. He fired 10 million federal employees. It was called war demobilization. And Keynesian economists at the time were predicting that we would be seeing 25% unemployment rates of a second Great Depression. Instead, we ended up with the entire post-war economic boom. So we know what happens with massive increases in federal spending. It implodes the economy, and we also, because we watched Herbert Hoover do the same thing and Franklin Roosevelt, we also know that reducing federal spending, reducing the burdens on the economy, actually creates jobs.
White House Press Secretary Jay Carney was talking about the budget yesterday during the news conference and talked about time being of the essence, but the president feels that he can meet the Friday deadline. Let's hear what the press secretary had to say, and then we'll get a response from Representative McClintock from California.
He remains confident that if we together roll up our sleeves and get to work very quickly, that we can find a compromise that reduces spending by $73 billion, protects the investments that are so key to our future economic growth, allowing us to innovate, out-educate, and outbuild the rest of the world. Yes, he believes that can get done, but time is of the essence, and that is why he is calling this meeting for tomorrow, and it is why he made some calls, as you know, over the weekend to Speaker Boehner and Leader Reid.
Representative McClintock, will you be involved in those meetings at the White House today?
Oh, no, that's a few pay grades above me. But you know, it's good that the president recognizes that time is absolutely critical. It's long overdue for him to step up and to provide some leadership. Right now, the leadership's been coming from Paul Ryan and the Budget Committee in the House. And I heard today that the Democrats on the Budget Committee may be offering their own budget quite independent of the president. That gives you an indication of how little faith they are placing in the leadership of this administration on this issue.
Regarding working towards keeping the government up and running, we've got this article from Andrew Taylor in the AP, and I wanted to read you this paragraph. It says, a one-week measure that cuts an additional $12 billion could reassure Tea Party-backed lawmakers who are among the most vocal in seeking to reduce the size and scope of the government. It could also put pressure on Democrats and the White House to offer greater spending cuts. How much influence has the Tea Party had in this whole process?
Well, the Tea Party is basically a grassroots movement of Americans who are extremely concerned about the direction that the government's gone. It's interesting, if you look at the polling on the Tea Party, you'll find that they have a support generally greater than that currently accorded to this administration, so they are hardly despite vicious attacks on them, are hardly a fringe element. They are very much a mainstream movement. The other thing that's very interesting about the Tea Party is that it's not a Republican movement. About 60% are Republicans, but about 20% of self-identified Tea Party members are independents, and another 20% are Democrats. Now, long before the Tea Party, we had another name for that phenomenon. We used to call it the Reagan Coalition, and it seems to be alive again in a new generation.
There are policy writers on Planned Parenthood and cuts at the EPA, for example. Those numbers, aren't they relatively small in comparison to the enormity of the size of the deficit?
Well, remember what Everett Dirksen said, using the old currency, $1 million here and $1 million there, and pretty soon you're talking about a lot of money. You know, with respect to the EPA, we've seen a 35% or so increase in the EPA just in the last couple of years. So that is a bureaucracy that is growing like topsy and has a huge negative impact on the economy. With respect to funding for abortions, there is a large majority of Americans who believe that government funds should not be spent for that purpose, and I agree with them.
Back to the phones and our discussion with Representative Tom McClintock, Republican of California, regarding the federal spending and the budget. Our next call comes from Erie, Pennsylvania. Laura, on our line for Republicans. You're on the Washington Journal.
Good morning, gentlemen. Representative McClintock, I want to say a quote from the late, great John Paul II, be not afraid. Continue to make this we want a balanced budget agenda to go forward. You rightly said those people before that have put this country's fiscal house in order, even Bill Clinton, surprise, surprise, but Ronald Reagan, all the greats, we cannot afford to spend $800 billion throwing away on interest alone, giving it to China, throwing it out the window. I think the message is you have made it clear, Republicans haven't, to an average citizen to say, I want to take $2,000 to $3,000 for every man, woman, and child to throw it away so we can continue this insanity. It's time to say we want a balanced budget. We want not only that, we want the social agenda to go forward, because what Michelle Bachmann said is true. The social issues reflect the fiscal conservative view also. We know what causes poverty, and we're spending $100 billion on people trapped in poverty because Planned Parenthood is saying continue the behavior, continue to have babies out of wedlock, the number one group trapped in poverty, continue all the behavior that causes these social ills. You need to stand firm and do what Rush Limbaugh and all of the conservative people are saying. This is not a compromise. We won't compromise.
Laura, we're going to leave it there. Laura in Erie, Pennsylvania. Representative McClintock.
Well, I agree with you completely that the social policies have huge, huge fiscal implications, and they do need to be addressed as fiscal problems on the budget side. We can argue about a lot of the ancillary issues later once our country's out of fiscal danger. But you're absolutely right. These things have implications. When I hear a politician say, well, I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'm a social liberal, I have never been able to understand how it is that you can finance socially liberal programs with fiscally conservative policies. The math never works out.
Next call comes from Salem, Massachusetts. Sam, you're on the Washington Journal.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to go ahead and address both the possible shutdown of the federal government as well as the budget. I just had a bit of a tongue-in-cheek solution here. Maybe the entire government should not take a paycheck for the next couple of years. Might help the budget, and also if you had to work a real job on the weekends, say, to make ends meet, you might know how the rest of us feel, you know? And also...
Sam, are you working more than one job right now?
I certainly am, yeah. I'm working a couple jobs and going to college, and I live in a tiny little heatless apartment. It sucks.
Sam in Salem, Massachusetts.
Well, I do have to say, members of Congress work very, very long hours. My schedule is usually 70 to 80 hours a week, and I think that that's typical of most members of the Congress. Be careful what you wish for, because you could well end up with a Congress that's made up simply of the idle sons of wealthy men. I don't think that that would be much of an improvement.
Next up, Scottsdale, Arizona, on our line for Republicans. Steve, you're on the Washington Journal.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my call. I had a comment and see what the man thinks. Like if we had you know, we have different crises. We have the Haiti crisis. We have all these other crises. We're donating money. Why not have like a fundraiser to help solve this problem? Get everybody involved in it and get some help from everybody. You know.
You mean like a telethon, Steve?
Yeah, have a telethon for this. This is the biggest crisis that we faced. Why don't we do something to get everybody involved? Like have a telethon, have everybody donate what they can. The millionaires could kick in plenty of money. You know, the billionaires could kick in a lot.
Steve in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Well, I don't think that's going to make much of a dent in the magnitude of the problems we have. But here's the really good news. The American people are involved. They are more deeply involved now than I've seen them during my entire time in public policy that goes back over 30 years now. Remember that the debates that go on inside the Capitol building are merely a reflection of a much larger debate that's going on among the American people. And that's the debate that's going on over backyard fences and family dinner tables and over coffee at Starbucks this morning. And it's upon the outcome of that debate that the future of our country will be decided. We've watched our country drift off course many times before in its history, and it's the American people engaging on these issues that have always brought it back. We're watching that phenomenon summoned again in our generation, and that's why, even though I believe we've got some very difficult years ahead of us, I've never been more optimistic of a long-term future of our country than I am as I watch the American people engage on these issues.
Representative McClintock is in his second term, elected in 2008. He represents the 4th District in California, which includes Oroville and Truckee and Susanville. And if you'd like to send him a Twitter message, his address is Rep. R-E-P McClintock, M-C-C-L-I-N-T-O-C-K. Back to the phones, Cleveland, Ohio. Lamar on our line for Democrats. Lamar, you're on the Washington Journal.
Hi. Good morning. Thank you very much for C-SPAN. Just a couple comments. I believe this caller from Massachusetts was on the right track when he asked the congressman, why won't the Congress or anyone there take a pay cut in trying to deal with that? And also, if they were struggling and out here and didn't have, you know, a pot to do anything in, then they probably would understand. And
Lamar, if the representatives took a pay cut, would it be more of a symbolic thing, or do you really think that that you can severely cut back on the $4 trillion deficit with cutting back on their salaries?
Well, first of all, they would get an idea of what it's like to really be dealing and not have anything out here when you lose your job because of all the corporate tax cuts when they take the jobs overseas. So they would have an understanding of what it's like not to have a job also. And then at the same time, I believe they have it backwards. You know, if the Republicans would have came in as dealing with a shortage of revenue instead of attacking spending first, and when people have jobs, then that makes up a lot of it.
That's Lamar in Cleveland, Ohio. And 34 Hunter, who sent us this Twitter message, is on the same track and says, economists say we have a revenue problem. Where in the GOP budget is this addressed?
Well, first let me address the congressional issue. You know, the Congress has cut back its salary, or its budget by 5%. It's frozen its salaries. It will be freezing all federal salaries, and I would presume congressional salaries as well over the next 5 years. On the question about revenue, revenue is really, really important. But there's a healthy way and an unhealthy way to try to get it. The healthy way is to remove the burdens that are crushing the American economy, remove the burdens that are making American firms non-competitive in the global market. The unhealthy way is to try to extract additional taxes in a brittle economy at the expense of economic growth. That's why the economic analysis of the budget that's about to be unveiled shows 1 million new jobs being created as a result of that budget, and unemployment dropping pretty dramatically to 4% by 2015.
Cincinnati, Ohio, on our line for independence. Ronald, you're on the Washington Journal.
Good, thank you for C-SPAN. Okay, the biggest problem is, I look at it this way. Okay, the budget. Taxes. Taxes come from working people. Trouble is, they don't come from the rich because the rich own the products. They own the services. They get a tax hike, that's overhead. They pass it on to the product. The people that buy the product and the service pay the taxes. Also, when you attack the jobs, the people who ain't got the money, you ain't gonna get no taxes. Okay, then you look at the corporate people at the top that have raped us over the last 10 to 15 years. They're getting away with it free. The people at the bottom are suffering, and you sit there and say, hey, we got to control the budget. Who did the damage? The past governments did. I haven't seen you try to fix it. Only I see you extending it. The people can't handle this no longer.
Ronald in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Well, first let me offer you one of the dirty little secrets about tax policy. Corporations do not pay taxes. Repeat, corporations do not pay taxes. Corporate taxes, business taxes, can only be paid in one of 3 ways. They're either paid by us as consumers through higher wages, they're paid by us as consumers through higher prices, they're paid by us as employees through lower wages, or they're paid by us as investors through lower earnings, usually on our 401ks. all of those tax burdens ultimately, as you rightly point out, end up on the backs of real people in the real world. So raising corporate taxes is really raising taxes on consumers, on employees, and on investors, most of which are small investors putting their money into 401ks and the like. The other problem with taxation is this. Tax rates reach a point where you can continue to increase tax rates, but that does not necessarily mean you're going to increase tax revenues. There comes a point where those taxes are putting so much of a burden on the economy that they are actually producing less total revenue. I'm from California. I've watched that happen several times.
There is an upcoming vote to raise the debt ceiling. Will you be voting for it or against it?
Well, it depends upon how much and how long. I will support an increase in the debt ceiling to support the overall spending that's set forth in H.R. 1 and in the budget that we're unveiling today. I will not support an increase in the debt ceiling beyond those limits. The budget that we're unveiling today does put us on a path to not only balance the budget, but ultimately to retire that entire national debt within a period of time I can actually hope maybe to be alive to see. Now, it's going to require eating a lot more broccoli than I think I'd care to, and so I think there's going to be additional work that's going to be required in future years. But it actually does put us on that course where somebody my age, I'm 54, can actually hope maybe to live to see that day when our nation is debt-free. That's a pretty important step.
Broccoli growers and broccoli marketers, address all of your mail to Representative McClintock. Also, sir, you've introduced a full faith and credit piece of legislation which essentially would prevent the U.S. from defaulting on the debt. Explain how that would work and where does that legislation stand?
Well, that's the companion measure to Pat Toomey's bill in the Senate, and the whole idea behind that is simply to assure anyone who is loaning the federal government money that even if we reach a point where the debt limit is not extended, they will still be paid. It essentially protects the full faith and credit of the United States. This is a provision that most states already have in their constitutions. The first call on state revenues in many states, including California, is for debt service. Put more simply, if you're living off of your credit cards, you better be very sure to make that minimum payment on the credit card bill first, and that's what this does.
Does that put programs here in the United States in danger of not being funded because we're paying creditors who happen to be overseas?
Well, actually, I think it strengthens those programs because it assures creditors, and most of those creditors are either the United States government or the people of the United States, that their investments are safe with the federal government.
About another 5 minutes in our discussion about the federal spending and the budget with Representative Tom McClintock, Republican of California and a member of the House Budget Committee. Our next call comes from Las Cruces, New Mexico. On our line for Republicans, Conrad, you're on the Washington Journal.
Hello, thank you for taking my call. Mr. McClintock, I'm currently in the military, and maybe I missed part of what you said earlier. But as far as the federal government shutting down, how is this going to affect us as far as military-wise, and especially concerning, I got like 11 years in, and I'm a senior non-commissioned officer, but as far as the lower-end soldiers, from the private to the specialists, that are just making it, to have families and are living paycheck to paycheck, how is this going to affect them? It's going to draw even more stress to them. They can't afford their rent.
Of course it will. No, it'd be terrible. It basically means the paychecks won't be going out to the men and women who are fighting for our country. That is an unacceptable situation. Now, that's why the House put forth a continuing resolution to fund the government through the end of the year 45 days ago, and the Senate has still refused to act on that. We put through 2 temporary measures. The measure that the Speaker is introducing today does take the military budget and fund it through the end of the fiscal year, and then extends the other spending for another week while the negotiations continue.
For those who might question the timing of Chairman Ryan rolling out his budget while the House, Senate, and the White House are still trying to get this continuing resolution situation in check, you would say what?
Well, the budget has got to be adopted this year. The Democrats last year refused to adopt a budget. That's a pretty dangerous thing. That's the spending blueprint for the federal government. We currently don't have one. That's why we're dealing with all of these CRs. That's why we're dealing with concerns over the shutdown of the government, because the Democrats last year did not even bother to adopt a budget. Now, if you're a family and you're having budget difficulties and you finally go to a counselor, a financial counselor, to ask, well, what do we do? The first thing that financial counselor is going to tell that family is, we've got to sit down and draw up a budget for you. That's what's going on now.
There's a balanced budget amendment that's been moving and working its way through the Senate, being pushed forward by several Senate Republicans. Your thoughts on the possibility of that actually coming to fruition?
Well, I think it's a very important reform. It's not the alpha and omega of fiscal responsibility. Again, I'm from California. California's had a balanced budget provision in its Constitution for years, and it's routinely ignored. That's the fault of the people not holding their elected officials accountable. I think, though, that it is an important tool. It's a very, very strong statement that the federal government has to do what every family does with its budget, and that is live within its means.
After the budget is rolled out today, then there will be a day-long markup on Wednesday. Briefly tell us how that procedure will work.
Well, it's going to be a marathon session. We're expecting to go in, I think, about 10 o'clock in the morning, and it won't be over until midnight at the earliest, I'm told, and there'll be votes throughout the day. It will basically be the presentation of the full budget and then amendments, principally by Democrats, and those amendments will be discussed and voted on one after the other until the process is done, hopefully not long after midnight.
We have been talking with Representative Tom McClintock, a Republican of California, and a member of the House Budget Committee, about federal spending and the budget. Sir, thank you very much for being on the program.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
In about 45